Hey everyone, we are live here. So this is Malts and Meeples. I'm Petter, your host, and this is kind of an experiment of some stuff that I've wanted to do here. I've wanted to branch out from just my gameplays, and the gameplays are a blast. I love doing them. But also then to kind of hop into some other board game content. I felt with my gameplays that I do want to get back into some bigger games. Again, it's been fun to do like a lot of the roll and writes and stuff like that. But I want to get into a campaign game again. I want to get back to Pandemic Legacy Season 2, which I had just barely started. So I wanted to transition a little bit more of the conversational stuff that I do over to another stream. So starting next Monday, I'm going to be doing every other Monday a stream on a topic, as well as maybe some quick reviews or top 10, something like that, something a little bit more interactive, and that can lead to a little bit more discussion versus just watching me play a game and kind of talk through the game itself. I think campaign games lend themselves to being more interesting watching at times, and who knows, maybe I'll throw in some of the roll and writes here. So let's get started for today, and get started with a beer. So last Wednesday we had Grapefruit Supreme. This Wednesday we are going with Mango Supreme. So it's the same family. It's again a tart ale, but this time instead of grapefruit it has mango. I've had it before. It is extremely refreshing. So let's start in on the topic for today. As you can see from the video title, this is all about talking about how to pick a board game to play. Now this came up because on Discord I'm part of, someone was trying to figure out what game they wanted to start playing solo. And when you have a number of games that you want to play solo, or a wide variety of things that you want to try, it can be really tricky kind of narrowing down what you want to play. And this is very much true still for other gaming as well. So for example, on Saturday I had a game night, and it ended up being partially in person, so that was a lot of fun to be doing that again. But with the game nights that I've done for years now, I always try and come up with some sort of theme, something that's going to drive how many or what games I pick for that night. So October, I'm going to pick, let's say, horror themes, so like zombie games or stuff like that, versus say spring, where I might pick lighter, kind of more fun games. So like early spring in March here in Minnesota, we still probably have snow on the ground, but we're ready to get out and start doing more. So I'm kind of trying to take my board game nights every time and create some sort of a theme or something that I use to kind of figure out what games I'm going to pull off my shelves back here, because I think with expansions I have over 300. So that is a lot to pick from. And I'm notorious when it comes to like picking a show to watch, of picking and watching the trailer for 7 or 8 different shows on Netflix. And then by that point in time, when I've scrolled through everything, my time for watching shows has gone from 2 hours down to an hour. And well, it's kind of fun to find some of those trailers and find like what you're looking for in that moment. That can eat into a lot of your time. So what are some things that I consider when picking games for like a game night? I already talked about theme, so I'll theme stuff, and then I'm going to consider a few other things, such as the number of people who are going to be coming or going to be playing the games. So with my game nights, that generally is between like 6 and 12 people, I would say. So sometimes when I start, I have to pick something that's able to handle more people. I want to pick stuff that everybody can kind of just play together for a little bit before we split off into other groups. And then I consider a few other things as well, besides the number of people and kind of the player count aspect. There's the complexity of the game and the game length. So in a game night, generally we start them at 7. So 7 to 8 is kind of when everybody shows up and is hanging out. And I want something that's easy for people to jump in and out of, or easy for people to watch and interact with. This is kind of the conversational part of the night for gaming. And so I'll pick out stuff. I'm looking over at my shelves here. Somewhere I have them like Zombicide, or over here we have a whole bunch of these bigger group games using cues. It's easy to add somebody into something like using cues or Codenames Pictures. And then I kind of move in terms of what I picked out and pulled off the shelf. So with that, I'm going to assume that we're going to split into 2 groups. And I'm going to pick something that maybe can play a larger number of people, but then those 4 people who want to play a heavier, more serious game can do that. So I'm going to be pulling off other games. And you kind of have to balance the seriousness of the group to the seriousness of the games, because sometimes you'll have people who they might not love party games, but will then kind of decide that they also don't like really complex games. These people will enjoy games more like the Sagradas and Ticket to Rides and whatnot of the world out there, because it's a little bit more serious gaming group, but don't want the really serious brain-burning games potentially out there. And so much of it depends on mood. Now, I love playing brain-burning games, and I've actually have a couple different groups of gamers, and they overlap some, but we have our board game night where it's going to be more about these lighter, more fun, filler feeling games that I pull off the shelf. And then I have what I call the board game club, which is 5 or 6 of us, more serious gamers, and we'll set aside an evening to just play a more serious game. And then even with that, I have a subset of that group, which are my campaign gamers, where we're playing through Tainted Grail right now. We've beat Gloomhaven, and we have Frosthaven eventually on the way. So it's going to be more of that focus on the group. and kind of that group dynamic and setting up the right groups to be able to play those games that you might not pick off your shelf for other things. Now, let's say I'm doing a game night with a bunch of more relaxed gamers who enjoy gaming but aren't necessarily going to play these super heavy games. I have, and I'm just looking right over here at kind of my family weight or easier games, and I have stuff from, let's see, just to go across 3 Calyx shelves here: Draftosaurus, Fruit Picking, Gravel, Homebrewers, King of Tokyo, 5 Tribes, Small World, Ticket to Ride, Fae, Carcassonne, Pandemic, Lanterns, and Century Golem. How do I narrow that down? If I pull all of those off the shelves and put them in front of a whole lot of people, that's not going to work super well. So, one of the questions that I like to ask with that is, am I feeling like learning something new or teaching something new? So, if I pull Ticket to Ride off the shelf, basically everybody is going to know how to play that immediately. Not everybody, but most people have played that before. Compared to, say, I pull Fruit Picking off the shelf, nobody's going to have played that before. I ordered that one through Board Game Geek, and the whole thing is in Korean. So it's going to be something they're not familiar with. Am I up for teaching? Are they up for learning? And as much as I love board games, I'm not always up for teaching something new. In which case, then I would want to pull the old classic off the shelf, or something that some of the group is familiar with. I have a nice kind of advantage in some ways. Like, one of the people who fairly regularly comes to board game nights when we're doing them in person loves games as much as I do and has a smaller collection but has played a ton of games. He actually works for Fantasy Flight or Atomic Mass now, I guess, with the Legion line of games. And he can teach games. Like, he's better at teaching games than I am. And I think I'm pretty good at teaching games. Though, both of us are probably really out of practice after the last year. So it's really nice because I can pull something that maybe I don't feel like teaching that day. Like, down here I have Deception, somewhere on here I have Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. That's a game he taught me. And a game that I can pull off my shelf and he can teach. So that's another thing to consider as well. And this comes up more often than you'd think. So, like, this upcoming month, we're going to be doing a board game night in person, and we're going to be playing roll and writes. And the reason I'm doing that is we're probably not going to have a huge group, so a lot of them will work for whatever player count we have, but also my wife knows how to teach some of these games. One of the people who will be there knows how to teach quite a number of these games. I know how to teach basically all the games I'm going to pull off the shelf from the roll and write section up here. So it means that I don't have to do all the teaching. That's another thing I think that a lot of people who like the hobby or like the hobby a lot can get a little bit burned out by is having to teach games constantly. So if you have games that maybe people who aren't as deeply involved in the hobby know, you can have them teach those games or help teach those games. And you can then go off and play with maybe a more heavy group of gamers, or don't have to be the person in charge of the teaching. And it's a real thing I've run into where it's just like, some nights I don't want to teach a game, but I don't also just want to play party games that everybody already knows. Now, the person who kind of started this topic, like I said earlier, they were debating what game to play solo. And I'm so glad that my live chat there we go. I saw it show up on my phone before I saw it show up on the screen. Yeah, like there's teaching and kind of hand-holding and babysitting. Like if I want to play something more serious, I sometimes have to teach the game over here, playing over here, and checking in to make sure everything's going fine over there. So it's nice to have those other people. So, yeah, it was solo games, and thank you for dropping that into the chat, Jazz, that brought this kind of topic to my attention. Now, I talked about at the very, very beginning how I want to get back into playing some bigger solo games. And so this is a question for myself as well, because you've seen me play a lot of roll and writes and things like that. And those don't require much setup, teardown, or space. And sometimes that is exactly what I want. It's been a long Wednesday. I don't want to have to pull out a whole game, set it up, and get ready to stream that. Or I don't want to pull out a big game and talk to myself and do that. That just seems like more work sometimes than I want to do. So I have to ask myself, am I gaming because I want this big epic experience? Or am I gaming because I want to do something that's more gaming for gaming's sake? So to go back up to these roll and writes up here and like floor plan, which I played last Wednesday, I played that one because I wanted to learn it, but also because it's a nice way for me to unwind. So sitting down and pulling a game like that off the shelf, I can be up and playing in 3 minutes or less. Whereas, like, one that I want to play solo, right back up here, Deep Madness, or over here with Reichbusters, or even Journeys in Middle Earth, those require me to spend more time setting up. And sometimes I just want to dive into something and turn my brain off and play, or challenge my brain in a different way, I guess is a better way to put it, than turn my brain off, and then have it just kind of refresh myself. When this happens fairly often, like when I'm stuck on something at work, it's really nice to just be able to, in this case, pull out my phone and play a round of Onirim or a game of Ganz schön clever, Doppelt so clever, Clever hoch 3, or Potion Explosion, anything like that, because it resets my brain. It allows me to stop thinking on stuff, and it allows me to just like focus in on one particular problem to solve, versus sometimes the problem I'm working on at work is too big to focus on, so I need to clear my brain because I've looked at too many of the pieces of it to then be able to go back and look at a specific piece. But then other times I want to play these big epic games, and when I do that, I have to, or when I want to do that, I have to think about, can I get them to the table with other people? So Deep Madness, wrong way, is one that is kind of scenario based. I can pull that down and play it with a lot of people. However, I'm not necessarily always going to be ready to teach that game since it's a complex game, and I need to know the rules well first. And if I'm only pulling that off the shelf every 6 months or a year because I can't get it to the table since it is such a big game, then that's probably not a great option for me. Instead, it's something that I can do solo. And then really that's why I started Malts and Meeples, is to play some of these games that I can't necessarily play. Like I said, I have that campaign group, but we took 2.5 years to beat Gloomhaven, including the Forgotten Circles expansion. And probably, well, so it would have been about 3 months before, or more than that, 6 months before we wrapped up Gloomhaven, we had already ordered Frosthaven. And Frosthaven looks like it's going to be coming, I'm thinking, early 2020. I think the target is still late 2021. My guess is early 2020. So we're playing another campaign, Tainted Grail, right now, and we're about a third of the way through it after having started playing that in January. So we play every other week, and we're going to be back in person again, which is so excited for tomorrow to play in person again and to play a campaign game in person again too. But that's going to eat up most of the time until Frosthaven comes, because that's just the base game that we're a third of the way through. There are 2 more campaigns the same size. That's, I think, approximately 150 hours worth of content, plus Red Death, which is another maybe 20 hours worth of content. So 170 hours worth of content. We probably put about 300 into Gloomhaven. So I need to get some of these games to the table for myself, and that's not going to be every week, and that's not going to be something that I want to do all the time because it is more effort. I'm checking out what you said there, Studio Lanniston. You have so many campaign games coming, I don't even know if I'll have a group to play through even one of them. I hope so, but solo, I will soon have Cradia and Hunters AD 2114. Yeah, I have Madara coming soon, and I have one person I know who wants to play that. So it is such a, like, you kind of have to be willing to play solo if you are going to play campaign games. And so, I mean, how do you pick which one you're going to play of those? That is a real trick. And for like my streaming, I don't know which one I'm going to do yet. Like I talked about, I think I'm probably going to go back to Pandemic Legacy Season 2 and play through that, because I know a game of that takes 30 minutes to an hour. I know how to set that up. I've done that before. I haven't even considered how I can get Frosthaven to the table after moving to an area with no gaming group. You had almost forgotten you had backed Frosthaven and Nosferatu. Yeah, it's... I think honestly, this was something that Quackalope talked about in a video with, I forget who it was with, but one that I watched today. And he talked about one of the regrets he had was not reaching out to more people to play games. And so, like, yeah, I get that. It's going to be a challenge to play a campaign game, especially in a new area with potentially no one you're connected to. So, like, I would start looking into, are there groups of people in that area? Board Game Geek has tons of different groups, like, or Facebook thread, or not threads, forum threads that can work. Or Facebook as well is a good way to get connected with people in the area. Or actually, even better than that is if you have Nextdoor, that app for the area. Now, that's mainly used for news, but it's also a decent way to introduce yourself to people in the area and shout out that you're nerdy and shout out that you love board games and maybe find somebody who'd be interested in it. And now, I'm an extrovert as a board gamer, but I'm not necessarily the super outgoing, going to knock on your door and be like, hey, I love board games. Have you heard about this wonderful new thing called board games? That's not me. But as I get comfortable, and like with my friendly local game store that I go to, I've connected with some of the people there, and when given the opportunity to do so, like they have a Discord. There was a random person on that Discord who was like, hey, I'm going to be here this day at this time playing Marvel Champions if anybody wants to. I was like, sweet. I haven't played many of the other characters at that point in time. Let me go and do that. Or there was somebody on the Discord who was like, hey, are you guys getting in Skull Hollow? I'd be interested to see it. And I have Skull Hollow on my shelf over here, and was like, hey, I can bring that in someday if you want to play it and shop. And so I've gotten a couple of different chances to play games with people, and sure, it hasn't been campaign games, or hasn't necessarily been people that I brought into like my immediate game group, but reaching out to people is kind of the way to go. Like, I've posted game groups for a few different groups of people, and there are two of the people who, when they saw this wall behind me, one of them was like, oh wow, that, like, this is their spouse's kind of dream room to have this game area. And so now, since I've played several times with them online and stuff like that, I'm going to start inviting them to my game night to bring more people in, because who knows, maybe that's going to be somebody that I play a campaign game with, or somebody who I'm going to play another game with. And I clearly fell off topic here, but some of that still maintains, like, picking games. Like, if you reach out to somebody and or put it out there that you like to game, and somebody reaches out back to you, it gives you an opportunity to pick stuff off your shelf and to really find out what other people like, and maybe a different type of gaming, but to get some of your games played. And that's the big thing. And yeah, Studio Linison, Skull Hollow is fun. I've only played it once, and I played as the Guardian, and it was so much fun. It actually took a little while because we were both learning the game, and we got into a situation where I would heal a little bit, they would damage me so I couldn't knock them off, heal a little bit, damage me, and then eventually they were able to knock me out. So close. But I'd be curious to know, kind of, how do other people go about picking games? Do you ever feel like you have too much on your shelves to be able to pick something perfectly? And I guess maybe that's something, well, people are thinking about it. Put in the comments below, or if you're watching later, or the live comments. But I think this is a trap. When I was talking about how I watch Netflix shows sometimes, or Netflix trailers sometimes while trying to find a show, is a trap we fall into, and it's a trap I know I fall into, where I look for the perfect game to play. Is that going to be something super big and serious like Tainted Grail, or massive like a 4X game, or simple and small like a roll and write? Sometimes it doesn't matter. Now, sometimes you are in a mood for something specific. Sometimes I do really want to play a grand epic game, and that's why I'm really glad I have that campaign group to play stuff with. But other times it's just like, I want to play a game. I don't know what game I really want to play. There's nothing wrong with grabbing Ganshan Clever, which is up over there, off the shelf and playing it for the 30th time. Sure, that might not be the perfect game for me to have played, but I could have sat over here and looked at my shelf for an hour trying to figure out what games I really want to play. Let's see, Nosferatu says, I feel like I back ambitious games on Kickstarter that I would like to play, and it's a trap, knowing my friends won't care as much as I do about it or bother test playing with me. Yeah, I have definitely backed games where I'm like, this game is for me. I don't necessarily have the group for that. I mean, when I backed Gloomhaven, I thought I knew who I might be able to get to play with me, but I didn't have that group in place yet. And yeah, Nosferatu, I don't know if you have like a friendly local game store or anything like that, but finding that spot to get connected and meet new gamers, or if it's a smaller area, something like that, to reach out to your neighbors, invite them over to hang out, to get to know them, and to kind of increase the pool of prospective gamers might work. Like, you never know who's a gamer. You really don't. Some people you could walk into a place and be like, yeah, they're a gamer. And other people never know. Like, when I went to Gen Con in 2019, there were plenty of people who I'm like, yep, you're the type of person I expect to see at my friendly local game store. But at the same time, there were tons of people where I'm like, I never would have guessed you liked games. Like, I'm stereotyping you because games are nerdy, and we expect people who look a little nerdy to then play those games. And you don't expect somebody who looks like a jock to necessarily be into board games, but there's no rule that says those two don't have to be the case. Yeah, Nosferatu says, most are happy with Zombicide. Then I pull out Kingdom Death Monster, and I see them heading for the door. Well, that just might be because they're worried about all the Kingdom Death Monster boxes falling over on themselves and crushing them. But I guess going back to my Gloomhaven group and my campaign group, I approached those two people with the idea of we're going to play a campaign game. Do you want to sign up for the commitment of playing a campaign game? Like a campaign board game, like Kingdom Death Monster, Gloomhaven, Tainted Grail, whatever it might be, is the equivalent commitment level of playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I would never pull out Dungeons and Dragons as part of a game night unless I had warned people ahead of time. Now, I could do a one-shot. I could say, hey, do you want to try a one-shot for this night? And definitely could broach it that way. Like I was saying, I think with wrong way, Deep Madness up here, it's a campaign, but each scenario is separate. So I could introduce the idea to somebody with basically like, hey, do you want to try this campaign game? This is similar to trying a one-shot in Dungeons and Dragons. See if you like it. If you do, we can continue it. Because it is scenario-based. Same with Reichbusters back here. Can be scenario-based. You don't have to run through the whole campaign as a campaign. And I don't feel like I'm losing out at that point. I get the game to the table, I get to try it out, and it's fun. Potentially. But up above me, directly over my head, I have Gloomhaven. I wouldn't do that with Gloomhaven. Like, there's Gloomhaven in its truest form, I feel like, is in the campaign. Sure, you can do shuffled together scenarios that are kind of generated off cards, but I feel like that's much more for people who have played Gloomhaven, maybe beaten Gloomhaven, and just want to continue playing, versus something like these one-shot scenarios, or how you can set it up in Reichbusters. It's meant to give people a taste. I might be off on that, but that's just a little bit how I feel about it. And so, I mean, who knows? Hopefully there was something useful in there about picking out a board game. But that is perfect. Hits the spot tonight. I just realized I closed my notebook and I have my notes for my quick reviews in here. So, this is something I haven't done before. I've done a ton of written reviews on board games. Over on nerdologist.com, I probably have 50, I would guess, maybe a few more written reviews up there. But I haven't done video reviews because it's a little bit of a crowded space. However, they kind of fit in here, and sometimes I might do reviews. Sometimes I might do top 10 lists. Sometimes I'm going to talk about a topic. But I wanted to kind of give it a go to do some reviews. Now, I'm not going to teach you how these games are played. That feels like it would be insanity with this being live. But I want to talk about and kind of show off some of these games. So to start, I have 3 different I'm going to move my notes closer to myself. 3 different dexterity-based games. So, the first one we have is Sonora. This one came out so before I get to this, Studio Lanison added in, I know I've backed and bought games with specific people in mind. It is frustrating to maybe miss the mark, or we've all had groups implode, and now I have games I worry I will never play. So let me flip back over here. So my spouse likes games, but she's not necessarily a gamer. She grew up with the, if you're going to play a game, somebody's probably going to take it too seriously, and it's going to be Risk or Monopoly, it's going to go way too long, and somebody's going to flip the table or the board or somehow destroy stuff. So I've tried to pick at times games that I think she's going to like, and some of them hit and some of them miss. Now, I know she's never going to be interested in something like Reichbusters or Deep Madness, or even over my shoulder here, Lords of Hellas, as a one-shot sort of thing. These I'm buying, well, Lords of Hellas, because I really wanted that game, and thankfully it turned out to be a success with some of the people that I game with. But there are other games like Blossoms over here that I picked up because it was a 2-player, fairly simple game, and we've enjoyed it. Or I backed on Kickstarter for her because we have a cat, and she likes cats and quilts. This one, and I don't know if she's going to like it or not because we haven't played it yet. Because I know sometimes the first teach of something can be a little bit rough, and since she isn't into games as much, I want to try and be able to, wow, that is horribly in focus. Let me lean forward, maybe that will get me. Who knows? I need a new webcam. Actually, I think I have one coming soon. I want it to be as easy as possible for her to get into it. Now, she has backed 2 board games on Kickstarter, so that's fun. One of them we have, Marrying Mr. Darcy. It's not a game I would have ever picked. And like, I might have picked it for her because of the theme, but it's been a smash success. Is it a top 100 game for me? No, probably not. But having that game that she'll enjoy, it's fun. And yeah, campaign games always make me think, and Falling Apart just always makes me think of Dungeons and Dragons. I have completed 1 campaign to a point where I was happy with it. I didn't have more story to tell directly in that world. Oh, no, I've completed 2. One of them was a short, like 3 or 4 shot campaign. But most of them fall apart, and with D&D, it's a little bit easier because I can use the same books and everything to tell yet another story, versus a board game, something like Gloomhaven up there, that, sure, I can go back to it. It's very possible I will play Gloomhaven again. It is my favorite game of all time. But had I gotten halfway through Gloomhaven and that group fallen apart, it would be really hard to come back to that game anytime soon because I already know the start. There are some games, such as Detective and Modern Crime board game that I have, where it is a campaign, and I would play that again as the DM. Like, I can't play that game again because I know how the scenarios work. Gloomhaven, there's so much content in there that, yeah, I can go back and play it again and not remember everything, but it's a tricky balancing act, I feel like, since sometimes, and I know one of the games the person who was asking about picking games was considering was Sword and Sorcery. Like, Sword and Sorcery, I sold my copy of it because I knew I wasn't going to play it again once I'd beaten it. There are several reasons for that, but some of it was the story. I knew the story. The story wasn't going to reveal anything new to me, so why not pass it on to somebody else who can enjoy it more? Alright, so let's get back to the reviews. If you have any more comments, anything like that, I am clearly happy to be distracted. And interesting, Fatal, that it just got you into the stream now. So Fatal is the one who has been trying to decide what game to play. And has been setting up Altar Quest, which might have distracted him as well. But let's talk about these 3 dexterity games. So the first one is Sonora. Sonora is a roll and write, except a dexterity version of a roll and write, a flick and write, where it has you flicking little discs around this board, and the area that you land in, that kind of determines what you do. So what I like about this game so much is that it is, like, the disc part, the flicking part, is super easy to play. The and right part offers a ton of different decisions because you have 4 different areas. All of these correspond to the different sections on this board, and depending on the number of the disc you flick in there, you fill in different things. And basically everything you fill in can help you score. It might be the areas you fill in, it might be different shapes, crossing stuff out, filling down paths. Whatever it is, it's going to help you score. Not only is it going to help you score, and then it's going to connect to other stuff. So, for example, over here in this bunny section, if I were to enclose this area, I get a fox. So if I get a fox, I go up here, I do something. If I fill in or surround the bunny with a shape, now I can go back down here and fill in more. So so it's a very fun game, and what I like about it is that it's a roll and write that has this feel, or flick and write, that has this feel that this part is something that's familiar. But then this part is something that's different, and the fact it has flicking really makes it more accessible. This bit looks confusing, can be a little bit confusing, but it doesn't look like a spreadsheet. And this, in flicking stuff, really doesn't look like a spreadsheet. So definitely a higher complexity roll and write that I am a really big fan of. I was trying to decide how I wanted to do my ratings because on the website I give it a letter grade and I think I'm going to stick with that. So this may not match what I have on the website, but I give it a letter grade in 3 different areas. The first being an overall score, followed by what I consider a gamer score and a casual score. The reason for doing those 3 different scores, or the 2 sub scores, I guess mainly, is to allow different types of gamers to know who this might work with. So this I give like an A- overall. There's one thing I knock it for that I have in my notes that I forgot to mention, which is basically the flicking part takes all of 2 minutes. After flicking, this can take 5. Then 2 minutes, then 5. 2 minutes, then 5. So it's not super balanced in terms of what you do. So if somebody really likes the flicking aspect, they might not like the other aspect quite as well. Overall, I give this like a B+, A-. Kind of in that range. For gamers, I'm actually going to give this like a B. Mainly because I think there are other combo-tastic roll and writes out there, and the flicking can be a little bit of a turnoff or a little bit of a that's too random sort of thing. For casual gamers, I'm going to give it that A-. This is the type of a little bit more complex game that works well for them. If you want the numerical rating, I give this a 9 out of 10. I really like it. It works really well for me. The next one up is not flicking, it is stacking. And this one, you are stacking up roads, which are just popsicle sticks. Yes, that high, Fatal. I'm a big roll and write fan, so for me, it's a very high grade. And I tend to love board games, so you're going to find that a lot of games have a really high grade. If I give it a low grade, I really don't like the game. So you're building roads with these, and then you're putting cars on them. Like you put cars, and these are pretty cool cars. I have the expansion that adds in trucks and stuff like that. See them there. And you're building roads, and you're trying to go over your opponent's roads and get under your opponent's roads. Studio Lennison says, if you need tweezers, the game won't be for him. So, the tweezers are for when you knock stuff over and are having to sneak it out from underneath stuff. Assuming you can't fit your fingers in there. I am not a dainty person, and I can make this work. I will not necessarily win this because I am not a super dainty person. And the first person to get rid of their cars, and it depends on how many people you're playing with, how many cars you have to get onto your roads, is the winner. This is a game that on the table is as much of an art piece as it is a game. It looks amazing setup. In my review of it on the website, then like I show off pictures I took of it. It just looks that good on the table every time. So, maybe the little bit of the negative for this is that it is truly only a stacking and balancing game. There are some people who do not have that hand-eye coordination. I do not have that all the time. And you are dealing with small spaces. This is going to be much more of a situational game. For me, the overall letter grade I give on this is like a B. Now that's a solid grade. I think for non-gamers, this is an A. This is for the casual crowd. This is going to be really good because it looks so good on the table. For gamers, my gamer grade is going to be more like a C, C minus. Maybe even pushing that D plus range, because it doesn't offer that strategy. It doesn't offer something that feels wildly different than, say, playing Jenga. But for me, because of how good it looks on that table, I really like this game. It's to go to a numerical grading for myself. I give this probably a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. Just because it's such a pretty game on the table, and it's when a game looks that good, it means I can get it to the table and play it more often. But did I save the best for last? Nosferatu says they have the dexterity of a drunken moose. Can't stack things, and it's gonna be a table flip. So this last one is for the drunken mooses out there. Ice Cool. Ice Cool is another flicking game and is a very simple game. You have your boxes all stacked together here that are your game board. You pull them out, and like you can see, this one has 3 different doors in it. And those doors, like, this isn't the correct way to line it up, but the doors line up with the other doors. So the theme of this game is also great. You are penguin students out there trying to collect fish while skipping class, hoping not to get caught by the hall monitor. So, Ice Cool, Penguin, High School, you see what they did there. I need to fix one of my penguins. But all you're doing is clicking your penguin, trying to get them through the doors. There's one person who is the hall monitor who is trying to flick, and that was a horrible one, and hit the other people. And that's the game. You take turns being hall monitor. You get cards that have points on them. And that's it. After everybody's been the hall monitor once, the game's over. Whoever has the most points wins. And what I love even more about this game, and what makes it even better to be a drunk moose, there's Ice Cool 2. What's the difference between these two games? Nothing. They're the exact same game, except for how the board's set up. So you can swap, basically flip the direction that the school goes. Not that exciting, except this is a 4-player game. Ice Cool is a 4-player game. You can combine them together into a massive board that will barely fit on this table, and you can play 8 players. You can do 8-player, like a race around everything, or you can do 8-player standard with 2 hall monitors and 6 students. And at the end of a game night, when everybody's had a couple drinks, or those who want to have had a couple drinks, and everybody's just winding down from playing bigger games, it is a blast. And like I talk about playing this while drinking, I played in the North American Championships at Gen Con in 2019, and I was top, what would that have been, top 8 out of almost 40 people who were in it. And it was the morning, all of us were sober. Well, all of us were not actively drinking. I'm assuming everybody was sober. And it was still a blast playing a serious game of Ice Cool. Now, Ice Cool is a top 10 game for me. Yes, that is my humble brag, for sure. We also found out that Canadian money does actually smell slightly like maple syrup, since there were a few Canadian players. And I don't know how that conversation came up, but it was true. But this game is a top 10 game for me. I give this game a 10 out of 10 for me. For the game itself, like if I'm trying to do that more objective letter grading, this kind of falls into that category like Tokyo Highway does. However, I'm going to give this one a better grade. Like I said, Tokyo Highway was kind of that B range. This is still going to get like an A minus. It's a solid A for non-gamers, and for most gamers it's still going to be an A, because it's just so much silly fun. So non-gamers, this is a solid A. For gamers, I probably give this game a grade of a B plus range, because you can do fun shots. So I can't really demonstrate this with the setup I have here, but you couldn't really tell, but if you hit the penguin's head down, it will bounce up, and you can bounce it over walls. You can jump between rooms, or I don't remember how this was done precisely anymore. I think it's something like this. As you flick, you can get the penguin to spin or not, and just you can have it go through a door. You could theoretically have it go through this door, through another door, and come back around this way if you get enough spin on it. It's just such a blast. Top 10 game for me. At least it was last year when I did my top 100 games. And I don't see it dropping too much, just because yeah, it's not a game that has a ton of strategy to it. There's some clever things you can do as you flick, but it's just such a blast to get to the table. Like I've played it with my parents. I've played it with my people my age and college student age, and it's just such a good time that always works. And honestly, this is one of two games that are going to be the games for my game night. Not next month. Next month's kind of the soft relaunch of in-person gaming. But in July, it's going to be Ice Cool and Pitch Car. Two games that work better with more and are just a blast to play, and something you couldn't have really played that much of during COVID unless you have a bigger family to kind of offset the fact that these games really do work better with more people. So, my plan had been to stream for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, just to see how that went. And I'm really grateful to everybody who showed up today. Thank you all for joining me in the comments. There's a whole bunch of links below. There's a notification bell and a subscribe. Both of those things will work fine unless your name is a fatal paper cut, in which case YouTube has disabled them on you. And yeah, thank you all for joining me, and bottoms up.